Argentina's inflation crisis. Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to talk about Argentina's inflation crisis, which reached a record high of 100% in February 2023. This means that the prices of goods and services have doubled in just 1 year, making life very difficult for millions of Argentines. But how did this crisis happen, and what can be done to solve it? Let's find out. The causes of the crisis. Argentina is no stranger to economic turmoil. The country has experienced several financial crises in the past decades, such as the hyperinflation of the late 1980s and the default of 2001. But the current crisis has its roots in more recent events. One of the main causes of the crisis is the lack of a credible economic plan by the government. Since 2018, Argentina has been struggling with a severe devaluation of its currency, the peso, which has lost more than 90% of its value against the US dollar. This has made imports more expensive and reduced the country's competitiveness in international markets. The devaluation was triggered by a loss of confidence in the government's ability to repay its debts and control inflation. In 2018, Argentina received a $57 billion bailout from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the largest in history, to stabilize its finances and implement reforms. However, the government failed to meet the IMF's targets and conditions, such as reducing its fiscal deficit and increasing its tax revenues. The situation worsened in 2021 when a political crisis erupted between President Alberto Fernandez and his vice president Cristina Kirchner, who are from different factions of the Peronist Party. Kirchner, who was president from 2007 to 2015, is facing several corruption charges and has a strong influence over Congress and the judiciary. She has clashed with Fernandez over his economic policies and his relationship with the IMF. The political uncertainty has increased the risk perception of investors and creditors, who have demanded higher interest rates to lend money to Argentina or buy its bonds. This has made it harder for the government to finance its spending and service its debt, which amounts to more than 100% of its gross domestic product, GDP. Another cause of the crisis is the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which hit Argentina hard. The country has recorded more than 6 million cases and over 150,000 deaths since March 2020. The government imposed strict lockdowns and restrictions to contain the virus, but this also hurt economic activity and employment. According to official data, Argentina's GDP contracted by 9.9% in 2020 and grew by only 2.5% in 2021. The pandemic also forced the government to increase its social spending and subsidies to help the most vulnerable sectors of society. This added pressure on the public finances and widened the fiscal deficit, which reached 8.5% of GDP in 2021. To cover this gap, the government resorted to printing more money, which fueled inflation. The consequences of the crisis. The inflation crisis has had devastating effects on the living standards of Argentines. According to official data, more than 45% of the population lives below the poverty line, and more than 10% lives in extreme poverty. The minimum wage is around $200 per month, but this is not enough to cover the basic needs of a family. The high inflation rate also erodes the purchasing power of salaries and savings. Many Argentines have lost confidence in their currency and prefer to use US dollars or other alternatives, such as cryptocurrencies or bartering. This reduces the demand for pesos and puts more downward pressure on its value. The inflation crisis also affects businesses and entrepreneurs, who face uncertainty and volatility in their costs and revenues. Many companies have reduced their production or closed down due to a lack of profitability or access to credit. This has increased unemployment and informality in the labor market. The inflation crisis also poses challenges for policymakers, who have limited options to address it. On one hand, they need to reduce inflation by tightening monetary and fiscal policies, such as raising interest rates or cutting spending. On the other hand, they need to stimulate growth by easing monetary and fiscal policies, such as lowering interest rates or increasing spending. However, these policies have trade-offs and risks. For example, raising interest rates can attract foreign capital and stabilize the exchange rate, but it can also discourage investment and consumption and deepen the recession. Likewise, cutting spending can reduce the fiscal deficit and inflationary pressures, but it can also worsen social conditions and trigger social unrest. The possible solutions. So what can be done to solve Argentina's inflation crisis? There is no easy answer or magic bullet for this complex problem. However, some experts suggest that some key steps need to be taken. One step is to restore political stability and consensus among different actors. This means that President Fernandez and Vice President Kirchner need to overcome their differences and work together for a common goal. It also means that they need to negotiate with other political parties, social movements, unions, business groups, and civil society organizations to build support for their policies. Another step is to reach an agreement with the IMF and other creditors to restructure Argentina's debt and secure new financing. This would reduce Argentina's debt burden and improve its access to international markets. It would also signal confidence and credibility to investors and markets. A third step is to implement a comprehensive economic plan that balances short-term needs with long-term goals. This means that the government needs to address inflation by reducing money supply growth and fiscal deficit while protecting social spending and subsidies for the poor. It also means that the government needs to promote growth by improving productivity, competitiveness, innovation, and diversification of its economy. A fourth step is to strengthen institutions and governance that can ensure transparency, accountability, and efficiency in public management. This means that the government needs to improve its statistical system, its tax collection system, its budget process, and its monetary policy framework. It also means that the government needs to fight corruption, improve regulation, and protect property rights. These steps are not easy or quick to implement. They require political will, social dialogue, technical expertise, and international cooperation. But they are necessary if Argentina wants to overcome its inflation crisis and achieve sustainable development. That's all for today's video about Argentina's inflation crisis. I hope you learned something new and enjoyed watching it. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to get notified when I upload new videos. Also, let me know in the comments what you think about Argentina's situation and what other topics you want me to cover in the future. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.